Years before Static Shock had a theme song, before the gloves, before the lightning bolt logo on the back of his jacket, there was a kid named Richie Foley tied up in an abandoned warehouse and a shadow standing over him who wasn't asking where Static lived. He was asking for a trade. Friend for friend. Free Talon. Get Richie back. Everyone who's seen Sons of the Fathers remembers the racist dad. Almost nobody remembers that the actual villain plan, the one Ebon built from scratch, wasn't a punch. It was a hostage exchange built entirely around the idea that Static could be hurt through someone who loved him. Watch that scene again. That's not a kidnapping, that's a thesis statement. And before we go any further, Static deserves every bit of love this fanbase gives him. Smart, funny, loyal to a fault, the rare superhero whose powers are basically a metaphor for his personality. He conducts, he pulls people toward him, and he holds the charge. Richie, his dad, Frida, none of that is in question, and none of it is about to get dunked on here. But somewhere in a Dakota subway tunnel, in his very first appearance, a bang baby named Ebon looked at that same conducting, charging, people-gathering hero and came to a different conclusion than the rest of us did. Not, he's strong because of who's around him, something colder, something that sounds almost like a diagnosis. He's exposed because of who's around him. Nobody took the thug in the gray vest seriously enough to write that down. We're about to write it down for him. Over the next several minutes, you're going to watch one villain, dismissed by recap blogs as a guy with an over-the-top laugh, treated by the show's own pecking order as muscle below Hot Streak and spectacle below Brainiac, get proven right again and again and again, across 4 seasons of television, and then, 20 years later, across 6 issues of a comic book nobody saw coming. And you're going to watch him be the one person who never figured out how to use what he knew. Sound familiar? It should. It's the oldest mistake a smart man can make. Start at the docks. Before Ebon was a name, he was Ivan Evans, a Dakota gangbanger who'd already done a stretch in juvenile hall, already lost his father, already spent his teenage years being the self-appointed man of the family for a little brother named Adam who wanted absolutely nothing to do with gang life. Ivan was there the night the chemical cloud rolled off the docks during the riot that the show calls the Big Bang. The gas didn't give him strength like Hot Streak or rubber bones like his own brother would get. It turned him into something with no fixed shape at all. A living shadow, vulnerable to nothing but light, capable of sliding under doors and through cracks no hero could ever physically block. That's not a small detail. That's the whole character, stated in his own body. Ebon doesn't fight from the front. He was built, by accident, into something that exists in the spaces between people. Here's a number worth sitting with before we move on. Ebon appears in 8 separate episodes across 4 seasons of Static Shock. Not one of those 8 plans is a straight fight he picked on his own terms. 8 chances to test a theory, and 8 times he reaches for the same lever. That's not a writer running out of ideas. That's a character whose entire engine only has one gear. His first real appearance against Static, the Breed, already shows the pattern before anyone could name it. He doesn't go for a straight fight. He works an angle, manipulating another bang baby into a trap, only getting flushed out when Static floods the tunnel with light. Lost that round, learned the lesson anyway. Static beats brute force. Static doesn't beat leverage. 2 months later, Sons of the Fathers airs, and Ebon does the thing none of his stronger rivals ever think to try. He doesn't wait outside Static's patrol route. He waits outside Virgil Hawkins's house, listens to a teenage conversation, and realizes the kid with the same haircut and the same voice as Static's best friend is worth more to him than Talon's entire jail sentence. Richie gets snatched off the street, and Ebon names his price as a person-for-person swap. Not money, not territory, a friend. That's the prophecy, stated once in a warehouse to a 15-year-old who didn't even register it as a warning. Here's where most was right videos cheat. They find one quote and inflate it into a pattern. We don't have to inflate anything. We have 8 appearances, 4 seasons, and the exact same play called over and over. Bad stretch, March 2002. Ebon's brother Adam, the same brother he tried to drag into crime as a kid, escapes from a robbery alongside the Metabreed. Ebon doesn't thank him. He frames him for it, knowing the show's own audience would clock the cruelty instantly. He is willing to sacrifice the one blood relationship he has left if it buys him cover. When Static exposes the frame, Ebon doesn't retreat into a normal fistfight. He drops Static into a magma chamber and only loses because Adam, the brother he just threw under the bus, saves Static's life with a bungee cord rubber arm. Write that down. We'll need it later. Season 3's gear is the cleanest version version of the thesis in the entire series.
Ebon doesn't go after Static's friends anymore.
He goes after Static himself in civilian form because he's pieced together that Richie Foley spends an unusual amount of time near a particular ordinary teenager named Virgil Hawkins. He grabs Virgil right outside Dakota Union High School and locks him in an abandoned juvenile detention center, the same kind of facility Ebon did time in himself as a kid, and watches him on a security camera, hunting for the one piece of evidence that would let him collapse Static's entire double life in a single afternoon. The plan fails because Richie, newly minted as gear, hacks the feed before Ebon can confirm what he's looking at. One hacked camera away from blowing Static's secret identity wide open. One flashback, same season.
Ebon doesn't chase Static through Dakota.
He chases a time-traveling bang baby named Nina Crocker because her power is the only thing that could let him rewrite the board entirely, going back 5 years to steal an even bigger dose of the original mutagen. Same instinct, bigger stakes. If you can't outmuscle the hero, change the rules that created him. Romeo in the mix.
Ebon, briefly allied with Static against a power-draining villain called the Leech, still can't resist locking his ally in a film studio the second it's convenient. Loyalty, even temporary loyalty, gets treated as a tool to be discarded the moment it stops paying interest. Notice what's missing from every single one of these. Ebon never once tries to outpunch Static.
Hotstreak does that constantly and loses constantly.
Ebon studies the wiring around Static instead.
The dad, the best friend, the brother, the secret identity, and pulls on it. 8 appearances, 4 different targets, 1 unbroken read on exactly where the hero is soft. Most villains escalate their power.
Ebon escalated his information.
Now, the obvious objection, and it deserves real airtime before we dismantle it, isn't Hotstreak the bigger threat? He's faster, louder, the show's default first rival, the guy with the actual history with Virgil before either of them got powers? Isn't Brainiac the real strategist, an actual alien supercomputer who eventually invades the entire planet? Both fair. Neither holds up under the specific question this video is asking. Hotstreak is dangerous in the way weather is dangerous. Relentless, but undirected, and beatable by the same move every time. Get him near water. Get him near Static's lightning. Watch him short out. Brainiac is dangerous the way an invasion is dangerous. Overwhelming, but external. Arriving in Dakota almost as a crossover event, rather than a product of Static's own world.
Neither of them ever once asks the question Ebon keeps asking.
Who does Static love, and what happens if I touch that? That's the gauntlet,
and Ebon clears it every time.
Because he's the only villain in the Rogues Gallery whose strategy requires him to actually understand Static as a person, rather than as an obstacle.
And here's where the irony turns the blade on him. Ebon spends 4 seasons exploiting the principle that bonds are leverage, and somehow never manages to keep a single bond of his own intact.
He recruits an athlete named Derek and renames him Destruct, who turns around and helps Static take him down. He's broken out of prison by Madeline Spaulding, refuses to take orders from her, and gets knocked unconscious by his own ally in a fight over who gets to be in charge. He builds an underground crew called the Nightbreed to help him block out the sun over an entire city, and the Nightbreed turns on him too. The instant Static gives them a better option.
Watch the rewatch revelation here. Every person Ebon has ever pulled close has eventually walked away from him and toward Static.
He diagnosed the wound perfectly. He just never noticed he was bleeding from the exact same place.
And there's a moment where Ebon almost catches himself doing it.
Almost doubts his own read. In Sheback, after Madeline Spaulding breaks him, Talon, and Hotstreak out of prison and declares herself the new head of the Metabreed,
Ebon actually defers to her for a stretch.
Begrudgingly, almost humbly, for a character who's never once been humble on screen. For a few scenes, he tries the thing he spent his whole life denying everyone else, letting someone else hold the wheel. It lasts exactly as long as it takes Madeline to bury her own ambition next to his, and the two of them tear the alliance apart from the inside, leaving Static, Gear, and Shebang to clean up what's left of the Metabreed without much of a fight at all. He doubted the theory once, the theory won anyway. He doubles down instead of learning from it. Army of Darkness Season 4.
Ebon finds a splinter group of light-sensitive bang babies calling themselves the Nightbreed.
And instead of asking what they want, he enlists them the way he enlists everyone, as tools pointed at someone else's family. The plan is almost apocalyptic in scope. Block out the sun over all of Dakota using a Nightbreed member's power over something called dark matter.
So the entire city goes permanently dark, and Ebon never has to fear daylight again. The Nightbreed turns on him before he can finish the job, defects to Static's side, and Ebon retreats again, having proven the pattern a second time without absorbing a word of it.
By the series finale, Power Outage, a cure for the Big Bang mutation is spreading through Dakota, and every Bang Baby,
Ebon included, starts losing their power.
This is the moment his entire worldview gets tested, and he reaches for the only ally he has left out of pure desperation, Talon, the one Metabreed member who's stayed loyal across every season, every betrayal, every power struggle. And this is where the thesis closes its loop. Talon doesn't just leave him. She quits the Metabreed entirely and walks straight to Static and Gear to warn them about his last play, using the exact same friend-for-friend logic
Ebon weaponized in Sons of the Fathers,
except now it's running in the opposite direction, and the bond he thought he owned is the one that ends him. Cornered, stripped of allies,
Ebon steals a vial of the last mutagen gas anyway.
And the final fight isn't against Static, it's against Hotstreak, his old rival, over who gets the last dose of power left in Dakota. They both get exposed to too much of it. They fuse, irreversibly, horrifyingly,
into a single shadow and fire monster the show calls Ebon Street.
A creature with no separate face, no separate name, no separate will. Static and Gear push it into the harbor. Its fate is never confirmed. As far as the original animated series ever tells us, the most relationship-literate villain in Dakota ends the show having literally lost the one thing he never thought to protect, a self distinct from anyone else's. Here's the flat version, no hedging. A bond that can be exploited can also be defended. That's the whole secret Ebon never cracked. Every single time Static survived one of his plans, it wasn't because Static fought harder. It's because the same network of people Ebon kept trying to weaponize kept turning around and saving the hero instead. Adam's bungee cord rescue, Richie's hacked camera feed, Destruct's betrayal, the Nightbreed's betrayal, Talon's warning.
Ebon understood that connection is a weak point.
He never understood that it's also a defense system, and defense systems only work for the side that built them in good faith. He built his career on a half-finished insight and got buried by the half he skipped. Which brings us to the part of this story almost nobody's watched yet because it's barely 2 years old.
In 2023, Milestone brought Ebon into actual DC continuity for the first time, in a 6-issue series called Static, Shadows of Dakota. The premise? Adam, Rubber Band Man, the little brother Ebon once framed for his own crime,
has been missing for months, kidnapped by a vigilante task force hunting bang babies. And the villain who spent an entire cartoon proving that family is the perfect pressure point is now the one applying for mercy. By issue 5,
Ebon's powers are useless against bright, reflective light shielding his brother's prison.
And for the first time in the character's history, he runs out of leverage to pull. So he does something the 2004 version of him would never have predicted. He goes to the Hawkins residence and asks Virgil for help.
And this is the line worth sitting with. The Shadow who once locked a teenage Virgil Hawkins in a padded cell, hunting for proof of his secret identity, is now sitting across from that same grown man, asking him to use the bond between them, hero and monster, on the same side for the very first time, hunting the same enemy in the same city.
By the final issue, Static, Shadows of Dakota #7,
Static and Ebon are fighting side by side against the organization that's been disappearing bang babies,
with Adam's fate still hanging in the balance. 23 years after a warehouse hostage trade, the man who turned relationships into weapons finally had to use one as a lifeline instead. Whether that's growth or just running out of other options is something the comics leave open. Either way, it's the same diagnosis, running the opposite direction, decades after everyone stopped paying attention to the guy who first wrote it. He was right about Static the whole time. He just never once applied the cure to himself.
If you've never gone back and rewatched Ebon's episodes with this lens on,
do it before Brainiac and Hotstreak get all the credit for being Dakota's biggest threats. The scariest villain in that city was never the one who hit the hardest. It was the one who understood, faster than anyone, exactly who you'd die to protect, and who never figured out that the same wire runs both ways. If this kind of breakdown is your thing, subscribe. There's a lot more Dakota left to unpack, and a lot more shadows nobody's checked twice.